Conquer yourself. Truer words were never spoken, and they were spoken by Navi, your fairy companion in The Legend of Zelda, the Ocarina of Time. Welcome everybody, I'm Lord Pogg, and this is Lord Pogg Gaming. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about conquering oneself, and I'm going to talk about it through the perspective of probably one of the most virtuous of all characters in gaming ever. I'm talking about Link from The Legend of Zelda. He is, without a shadow of a doubt, the most heroic, chivalrous, virtuous, you name him. You go down the line of good things and he's them. Link is just a true hero. Real quick before I get into it, I want to give a shout out to MajorLink's channel and his episodic show called A Hero's Purpose, which takes place in the timeline of the Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, and Twilight Princess. So if you haven't checked that out, go ahead and do so. Also, my two friends, my brother and our good friend, we've been doing a review episode by episode, which you can find on this channel as well. So, I mean, watch the reviews, but honestly, go watch the show for yourself. It's good. Now, talking about this, I'm going to use the Ocarina of Time as the prime example of the topic I want to talk about the most, and that is one's own Shadowself, or as it's called in The Legend of Zelda, the Dark Link, but I mean it's just your dark self. We'll start by first talking about the game in general, the Ocarina of Time, and just Link in general. The reason why I chose the Ocarina of Time is because it's by far one of my favorite Legend of Zelda games ever. I know we have Breath of the Wild and the new one that just came out whose name escapes me, so I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of hate in the comments section for that. But and other good Zelda games, I mean, they're all good in their own right. The Ocarina of Time just hits different for me. I think it's because it was one of the first games where one of the first Legend of Zelda games where we got a good amount of in-depth story. Now, granted, A Link to the Past and games like that had some good in-depth story, but this one, I don't know, when you put it into a 3D world and start 3D modeling it and creating the story, it becomes more. And the idea that here we have this child who grew up without a mother and father and then is just chosen to save all of the land. He sacrifices so much, and he does it without question. And that is what's beautiful about Link. The Greeks have 5 different words for the word love. We tend to, in modern culture, cover love. It's more of a blanket statement. And really, that's because we're trying to encompass all 5 of those loves into our modern day version of love, that blanket statement, right? But it doesn't always work that way. Sometimes you're missing one of those loves in that love that you may have, and that doesn't necessarily make your love less. You know, that's why they call it making love, because you have to make it. Sometimes you work for one of those loves you may be missing, and maybe you achieve it, maybe you don't. The kind of love I'm talking about here is the brotherly love, or the agape love, the love of sacrifice, being willing to sacrifice yourself for others without question. And I find it so fascinating that Link just seems to be born with that agape love. But does that make him perfect? No, it doesn't. It doesn't. In fact, it probably makes things harder for him, because the more virtuous a person is, the harder it is for them to exist. It is so much easier to give in to our wants and our carnal nature than it is to do the right thing when you know it's the right thing. Especially doing the right thing for the right thing's sake. Link has this dark side of him, this dark Link, if you will, that he keeps buried. And so we're going to talk about that. First of all, let's talk about Dark Link for a minute. He is the mini boss of the Water Temple. It is the 6th dungeon of The Legend of Zelda: The Ocarina of Time. You can get a lot of that information from the Zeldapedia, and I'll put a link in the description if you know, just to make it easier on you if you're ever curious about reading a little bit more about Dark Link. But just so you know, that's his part in the game. He is a mini boss of the Water Temple. The thing is by the time you come into him, by the time you run into him, you are so far into that Water Temple. You've made so much progress that you're not going or doing anything else until you defeat him. And it's so unceremonious. The fight, the situation, all of it. I mean, it happens and you're like, whoa, what's going on? And it's a really hard fight. Dark Link mimics your movements. He's tough. He's got this move where he jumps onto your sword and then backflips you in the face. I mean, it's tough. You know, think of the movie Kill Bill. If you've never seen that, there's a scene in that where Uma Thurman tries to stab this guy and he jumps and balances on her sword like Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon style, and then just backflips and kicks her in the face. Dark Link will do the same thing to you, long before there was a Kill Bill, I might also add. Not saying that's where Quentin Tarantino ripped it off, but I don't know. Let's stay on track here. Anyways, you are not going to get any further until you face yourself. Or, as I said in the beginning quote, Navi, your fairy companion, tells you conquer yourself. And it is so unceremonious, but isn't that really what it's all about? We, day to day, live our lives either conquering ourselves or giving in to our darker selves. And that's not always a bad thing. But every human being alive has a dark Link, or a dark whatever your name is. That is, or a Shadowself. Arthur Schopenhauer, one of a famous psychologist of his day, well, not of his day, but he's a famous psychologist now. Really underutilized. He was known as the author of pessimism. But one of the things he had to say was, the world as will and representation. The world is my idea. This is a truth which holds good for everything that lives and knows, though man alone can bring it into reflective and abstract consciousness. I love those words, reflective and abstract consciousness. When you fight Dark Link in The Legend of Zelda, he is a reflective and abstract consciousness because he comes out of a reflective surface to fight you. It is both reflective and abstract what happens there. The whole situation is both reflective and abstract. And I truly believe that our subconscious knows this, that to face oneself, you must first reflect upon you. Take stock in yourself and see what that is. See where you are strong and where you are weak, and give it some thought. Give that consciousness a thought. And you could say it's abstract because it is not exactly you that you are reflecting upon. It's that other form of you, that side of you that you keep hidden. That side that society doesn't necessarily respect nor want. See, when we grow up, we are children, and when we grow up, we are children. Duh, that's a stupid statement. That's stupid. When we grow up, we have this idea of the world. You know, as a child, you have this idea of the world and what the world is going to be like. And you don't know yet what your limitations are, if you have any. And that's a whole other can of worms. But you don't really know what your limitations are, or you haven't put limitations on yourself. The only thing you know is so and so can do that, but I bet you I could do it too. All I got to do is just do it. And you do. And that happens up until a certain point, and then you either kind of, I don't know, sort of fall off in one direction and just say, no, that's not for me, but you excel here, or you don't, and you just learn to think like society expects you to think, and you push all these things down. There is a song called The Logical Song, and I believe it's by Tramp. I'm not entirely sure, but I will post it in the link in the description so you can listen to it. And that song talks about that, about the childhood wonder and the magic of being a child, and how eventually you're ripped out of that and forced basically to believe the way that society expects you to. And that is the start of forming your shadow self, your dark self, that abstract consciousness that we should reflect on at all times. Because if not, it becomes your dark self, and you may have to conquer it. There is a gentleman, he is also a famous psychologist by the name of Carl Jung, and I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, but Carl Jung. And he was one of the people that was heavily inspired by Arthur Schopenhauer, and he had a lot to say actually about one's own shadow self. Like I was saying earlier about Link being in the temple, in the water temple, and he cannot move on until he defeats his darker half. Carl Jung and Yoga and the West, he said, only the man who goes through this darkness can hope to make any further progress. We push this abstract idea into ourselves, and we hold it and we lock it away, but it doesn't make it any less who we are. That's the thing. It doesn't make us any less who we are. In fact, it's a part of us. It's a subconscious part of us. There are times where we subconsciously undermine ourselves, and we don't really even realize we're doing it. Maybe it's because of a subconscious thought that maybe we're not good enough and we know it. We don't deserve this happiness. There could be a number of reasons for it. But that's part of our shadow selves, and that's part of the shadow self trying to have a voice, because you push it back so hard, because society doesn't necessarily accept that part of you, and the part that you do show society is the part that society does accept. And so the shadow part works basically within the shadows of your mind, in the subconscious, in the abstract. But Carl Jung here, he makes a good point of saying that if you can only move forward in life if you accept this darkness. You have to face it. You have to go through it. If you're going to make further progress, you have to accept those darknesses. Those darknesses? That is not correct. You have to accept that darkness that is inside you, first and foremost, and then learn what is good about it and what is bad about it. Because then if you understand it, then you can know how to use it proper. Because I'm not saying that sometimes the things that we don't allow into society isn't a bad thing. Sometimes the things we don't allow into society is in actuality a bad thing, is what I'm trying to say. It's not acceptable. It's not acceptable for society. It's not acceptable outside of society. It's just not acceptable because man is abstract. We are abstract, and sometimes we get sick ideas in our heads. That's true. And when I say man, I mean mankind in like generalized terms. This applies to women as well. Everybody has a shadow self. So I'm not just talking about one gender here. Keep in mind. So I'll try to be a little bit more mindful of that as I'm going further on, but just keep in mind that I'm not excluding anyone here. Carl Jung, in Memories, Dreams, and Reflections, also had to say, the shadow is the inferior part of the personality, sum of all. Psychic elements which, because of their incompatibility with the chosen consciousness attitude of the persona, are denied expression in life and therefore coalesce into a relatively autonomous splinter personality with contrary tendencies in the unconscious. That's basically a real fancy way of saying what I was just talking about. it is an inferior part of you in a sense where it is the easiest part to push down. And sometimes it's not always a good part that you're pushing down. You know, it's psychic, the psychic element, it's of the mind, it's abstract, you have your conscious attitude or the persona. It's like id, you know, the persona, who you are, your persona, your id. But this is denied expression, meaning, like I said earlier, you push it back, you hold it back because maybe sometimes we as people will go with the grain instead of against it just because we're afraid to show people who we are. And sometimes that's not always a bad thing. Who you are, that part of you that you're afraid to show, isn't always a bad thing, because the most creative people in the world didn't go with the grain. They swam upstream. The legend of the koi fish, you know, it swims upstream up the waterfall and becomes a dragon. You know, to become a dragon, sometimes you have to take that chance and swim upstream. And so sometimes you should let that denied expression have a voice, or you're going to create a splinter personality, as Mr. Jung says here, with contrary tendencies in the unconscious. In other words, subconsciously in your unconscious, you're going to have something that constantly is trying to bring you down, because it's like a vicious animal that you don't ever feed. You know, it eventually will bite the first hand that tries to feed it. It won't just eat a little bit that you give it. It wants the whole thing, arm and all, food, man, all of it. It wants all of it. How many more times can I say he wants all of it? That is what you take a chance of your shadow personality. When you don't give it enough of a voice, it becomes a contrary. And it will undermine the things that you do. You'll have a good idea, get all hyped about it, think, yeah, I'm going to do this, and this is going to work out, blah, blah, blah. And then if you give yourself even a day without doing anything, all of a sudden you start picking holes in it. What do you think that is? Again, I'm trying to say that it's not always a bad thing. The shadow personality isn't always a bad thing, because the shadow personality sometimes is the voice of reason that's telling you, no, don't do that. Carl Jung in Civilization in Transition had to say, we still attribute to the other fellow all the evil and inferior qualities that we do not like to recognize in ourselves, and therefore have to criticize and attack him when all that has happened is that an inferior soul has emigrated from one person to another. The world is still full of scapegoats, just as it formerly teemed with witches and werewolves. We are referring our evil tendencies, who we are, blah, 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 all the bad things to our shadow self. And then our shadow self, here's the thing, we'll see it in other people, but we won't recognize it in ourselves. And that's what Mr. Jung is talking about here. We will see it in others, but we will not recognize it in ourselves, because it's an inference. or a deference. It's actually a difference, I think, not an inference. An inference is knowing something. Anyways, it's one of the two, but I believe it's a deference. We defer these things that we know are in ourselves to other people because we can see it in them. So it's easier to point it out in them than it is to deal with it ourselves. But again, we can only move forward if we face the good qualities of our shadow persona. There is no such thing as not having a shadow persona. To deny it is to, well, you might experience pain. Pain mentally, pain physically. It is amazing what we can do with the human mind if we want to. You can make yourself sick if you think you're going to get sick. It's happened. There's a, what Munchausen symptom, the Munchausen symptom, you're sick by proxy. There is all sorts of different things that can happen when you believe hard enough in it. Mr. Jung, in 2 essays on analytical psychology, said there are patients who boast that for them the shadow side does not exist. They assure us that they have no conflict, but they do not see that the other things of unknown origin cumber their path. Hysterical moods, underhand tricks which they play on themselves and their neighbors, a nervous inflammation of the stomach, pains in various places, irritability for no reason, and a whole host of nervous symptoms. That almost sounds like the Joker from Batman, honestly. He sees nothing wrong with his personality, and yet he is a raving lunatic, which is Mr. Jung's way of saying the things of unknown origin that cumber your path. We all have known people and have been that person before who, for whatever reason, we just need some kind of anarchy in our lives. We need a little chaos today. We need to cause some problems. And we wake up, isn't it funny how some of the days where we feel like it's just a great day to be alive is that one day where we're ready to just cause as much trouble for somebody else? Because we're in such a good mood, it's like we're walking on sunshine, so we want to set it all on fire. And maybe I'm alone here. Maybe I am, but then again, maybe you're one of those who boasts that for them, the shadow side does not exist. I don't know. But at the same time, the more you deny it, the more it doesn't go away. The more it begins to undermine you. As I've said in the past, it becomes your abstract mind. It becomes that part of you that works against you because it needs a voice that you have denied it for so long. And again, I can't state this enough. It's not a bad thing. Not all of it. Some of it is actually useful. Sometimes we can learn from this. We can learn from it and know what our true strengths and our true weaknesses are. Carl Jung in Civilization and Transition also had to say, seeing both sides, we become aware not only of our moral inferiorities, but also automatically of our good qualities. We rightly say, I can be as bad as all that. To confront a person with his shadow is to show him his own light. In other words, looking at the bad, not ignoring it, not denying it, but actually letting it voice itself. Having a conversation, inner reflection of our abstract mind, of that persona that we have given no light because society doesn't deem it normal, or maybe we just don't think of it as normal enough because it doesn't quite fit in. It shows us. If you sit down and have a conversation with it and actually learn what is good and what is bad, we can say, I can't be as bad as all that. And then you won't be. You'll work towards the good because the shadow has shown you what can really be bad, but it can also help you show what's really good. And because you've given it a voice, now it is the conscience that can be your guide. As Jiminy Cricket once said, it can be the conscience that it can be your guide. It can be your guide. It can help you because you know what you're not supposed to do, but you can't deny it, because to deny it is, well, for a lack of a better word, living in denial. You don't want to do that. Face yourselves. And that is why The Legend of Zelda is such a great game for this moment in time. That's why the Ocarina of Time is such a great game for this moment in time. Because it almost happens so unceremoniously. I mean, it really does. You almost don't even realize what you've just done. You just knew that that was a hard fight. Because, again, it is a hard-fought battle. And inner self-reflection is a hard fight, people. I'm still doing it every day. Every day of my life, I'm looking at myself because I'm going to be honest with you, my natural state of being isn't necessarily always being kind, always being gentle, always being loving, always being thoughtful, always being caring. My normal state of being is not these things. I'm not always a fair man. You know, I can be a very selfish person, a very arrogant man. I can be mean. I can be selfish. I don't know if I said that yet or not, but I can be all these things. But I can't be as bad as all that, can I? Not if I face it. And not if I conquer myself. And you can too. Any one of us can do it because we all share that. Man, woman, and child. We all share that dark self, that inner shadow. And in The Legend of Zelda, what a brilliant game to have such a pivotal moment and let you act it out. I admire Link, and I guess this is where this video is going, that I admire Link from The Legend of Zelda. I especially admire the one from the Ocarina of Time, though I'm sure they're all great. But I especially admire the one from Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, and those two games especially. I know the Twilight Princess is in that same sort of timeline, but it's not the same Link, so. But I admire that Link. I admire the Hero of Time. Because he showed that agape love, that brotherly love for his land. As a small child, he set out. And without question, he fought to protect Zelda and everybody else around him. He stood up to Ganondorf, insurmountable odds. I mean, as a small child, Ganondorf could have punted him across all of Hyrule. But he showed extreme courage. And then later on, he finds the Master Sword, waits for the 7 years, comes out, he's grown, and he continues his journey. And he loses so much to protect everybody else. But he gains, I think one of the greatest things he gains in this whole game is the fact that he faces his shadow self. He gets to defeat the darkness in him so he may carry on. And we're all traveling down the river of time. We're all flowing down the river of time. And we can't stop it. Time is a currency you can only spend. You can't make it. You can't get it back. And I know that sounds really depressing, and I'm not trying to be depressing. I'm just trying to let you know that we're all on our own adventure. And sooner or later, the only way we're going to move forward is if we face that darkness. Face your shadow self. Look at the bad, so the good may be bright. And then accept it. And let it be your guide. Let it be the thing that keeps you from becoming the shadow self. Because then you won't undermine yourself. You won't subconsciously work against yourself. You'll work with yourself. It's a very special kind of duality, and it requires a strong level of self-reflection, and it's a lifelong journey. Link had the advantage of just getting to defeat it in one go, or in one fight. Ours will be multiple fights. But the more you do it, the stronger you will become at it. You'll find that you and your shadow self go hand in hand a lot more than you thought it did. And who knows, maybe it'll even show you a piece of your persona that the world needs to see, because that's how legends are made, my friends. Well, I want to thank you for spending time with me again on this video. I really appreciate everybody. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. You guys are a blessing to me, and I want you all to know that. And if you're feeling, a particular way, please leave a like and share. And if you're feeling, ultra generous, go ahead and subscribe and leave me a comment down below letting me know how I'm doing. Other than that, I really appreciate everyone, and I want you all to know something. And it's going to sound weird, but I've been doing this self-reflection here lately a lot more than I ever have, really. And it's partly why I wanted to share this video with you, and part of the reasons why I looked at Link, because I feel like even though he's not a real person, his idea is achievable, but it's a lifelong goal, and that is to become the virtuous, giving, loving person, having that agape love for your fellow man and woman. There you go. But I want you all to know something. I know that I don't really know you. I don't know you from Adam. You don't know me. Not really. We see our names, but they're taglines, basically. I don't know what you believe. You don't know what I believe. I don't know where you're from. You don't know where I'm from, this and that. But in this moment, we are friends, because we come together and you all allow me to just talk your ears off. And I just love you all for that. And so I may never really know your names, know you, know what you believe, or anything. Just know that I love you. I really do. And I love you for letting me just talk to you. And in a way, this is therapeutic for me, and it helps me vent. So I love you for that, and thank you. Thank you all so much. And y'all come back now. You hear?